Did you hear what was being said about Collingwood in September? The Magpies had a reputation. Loud fans, bigger-than-life club. But finals were always a question mark. Critics said they folded under pressure. Analysis claimed their superstar list was overrated. Opposing teams, especially Richmond, West Coast, and Geelong, thought if you got in their heads early, you could dictate the game. But in AFL, trash talk and finals pressure are a dangerous gamble. And for Collingwood in the 2010s and 2020s, some of the biggest moments of their era came when the club was doubted, sledged, and mocked. Every taunt, every whispered doubt, every pre-game prediction of failure became fuel for the Magpies. And history shows how that played out. Let's start with the 2010 Grand Final against St Kilda. Collingwood had lost the previous year's Grand Final in a heartbreaker after the replay against the Saints. St Kilda fans were talking like they already got the measure of the Pies. They'll fold under finals pressure, the whispers went. But Collingwood didn't fold. Instead, they dominated the replay. Scott Pendlebury and Dane Swan were everywhere. Jack Anthony kicked the goals that mattered, and Collingwood won the premiership by 56 points. The Pies had turned all the pregame talk about fragile under pressure into one of the biggest blowouts in modern Grand Final history. Fast forward a few years, 2011 and 2012, Collingwood kept being tested. Finals pressure was always there, and the Magpies' habit of being targeted by sledges only grew. The media often focused on players like Dane Swan and Scott Pendlebury, highlighting their supposed inability to turn up in the clutch moments. Opposing coaches would devise tagging systems to nullify them, while pundits speculated on whether Collingwood's midfield would implode under heat. 2018 brought another chapter. Collingwood were back in September, fighting for a top 4 finish, and the finals were set. The opposition's game plan was simple: get in Collingwood's heads, play niggly football, hit hard at stoppages, and make the Pies think twice before every disposal. Players like Jeremy Howe and Steele Sidebottom were tagged, but the Magpies responded with composure. Pendlebury, as always, was the conductor. His handballs, clearances, and vision broke lines open. Collingwood finished the preliminary final in dominant fashion, proving that sledges meant nothing when football intelligence and skill take over. Then there's the 2023 Finals Series. Collingwood had a list full of stars: Jordan De Goey, Isaac Quaynor, Nick Dykos, and Scott Pendlebury providing the spine. Analysis had predicted they'd crumble under pressure, especially in finals against high-powered sides like Melbourne or Geelong. Pre-match, pundits and opposition fans alike talked about how Collingwood's flair could turn into recklessness. Pressure exposes them, won't call them red. Opponents tried everything: off-the-ball bumps, pushing in contests, and verbal sledging. But the Magpies have a history of responding on the scoreboard. Each tagger who thought they could stifle De Goey's runs or Pendlebury's distribution ended up as a stat on a highlights reel. Collingwood's approach to trash talk is interesting. They don't always answer it in interviews. They don't post Instagram videos. They respond on the field. And in finals, that response can be brutal. Every contested mark, every contested possession, every intercept or goal becomes a direct answer to the words thrown at them in the week before. One of the most famous examples is the 2010s rivalry with Hawthorn. Media narratives painted Collingwood as the spoiler club, capable of beating anyone, but also liable to choke in finals. Hawthorn, meanwhile, thrived on psychological tactics. Their press conferences would tiptoe around the Pies' fragility, suggesting Collingwood were too emotional, too inconsistent to handle back-to-back flags. The Pies ignored it. In 2010, 2011, 2018, Collingwood found ways to win, proving that skill and composure outweigh pre-match talk. And it's not just finals. Regular season games against top opposition often see the Magpies targeted by sledges and provocations. In 2017, De Goey had a few classic moments. He was tagged relentlessly by Edison and Sydney defenders, with players whispering and nudging him at every opportunity. The media covered it as if De Goey was being handled, but by the end of those games, he'd usually set up multiple goals, kicked 2 or 3 himself, and left opponents frustrated, waving their hands in disbelief. Collingwood, as a team, often used this kind of pressure as fuel rather than distraction. Let's not forget the 2018 preliminary final against Melbourne. The pundits were skeptical. Collingwood can't close the big games, one report said. Melbourne fans predicted a blowout, But from the first bounce, Collingwood showed discipline. Every forward entry was calculated. Every tagger Melbourne threw at Pendlebury was shrugged off. Side bottom, crisp, Dykos moved the ball with precision. By a three-quarter time, the scoreboard told the story. The Magpies weren't just surviving, they were controlling the contest. Trash talk? Rendered irrelevant. Collingwood's defensive structure is another layer in how they respond to provocation. When players push, bump, or talk, the team doesn't react emotionally. They compress the ground, cover space, and punish mistakes. It's a classic example of turning pressure into advantage. In the 2023 Finals series, Nick Dykos became a key example of this. Opponents try to isolate him, whispering or jostling, but his ability to read the game and make clever disposals neutralized their attempts at psychological warfare. Every time he turned a tackle into a scoring opportunity, the media's pre-game talk looked foolish. And it's worth noting the fans. Collingwood supporters have a reputation for being loud, passionate, and intimidating. Opposition players often feel it before the first bounce. That fan energy adds pressure, sure, but for the Magpies themselves, it's fuel. The players feed off the chants, the Go Pies, and Collingwood, echoing around the stadium. It becomes a shield and a sword, turning any external trash talk into motivation. Even the coaches contribute. Damien Hardwick's Richmond colleagues, or even Hawthorn's Alistair Clarkson, would sometimes comment on Collingwood's mental edge when the team stays calm under sledging. That calm comes from preparation and confidence and structure. Pre-game barbs might energize one club, but for the Magpies, it's a key to execute even cleaner. Collingwood's record in high-pressure finals tells the story. Sure, they've had losses. The 2011 draw replay against Geelong and the heartbreaking 2018 preliminary final come to mind. But the consistent theme is that when trash-talking media doubt hit the peak, the Magpies respond with composure and football intelligence. And when they win, it's empathetic. When Jordan De Goey marks, spins, and snaps a goal under pressure, or Scott Pendlebury threads a handball chain across the corridor, that's the answer to anyone who try to sow doubt. There's also a strategic element to their response. Opponents try to get in players' heads early. High bumps, rough bodywork, verbal nudges. But Collingwood's game plan anticipates it. The team uses the physical contest to gain advantage. Push, body, win, and then move the ball cleanly. Trash talk doesn't break the rhythm, it amplifies it. The bigger the sledges, the more meticulous the execution. And Collingwood's ability to absorb pressure and turn it into results extends beyond individual brilliance. Finals are a team sport. When Pendlebury controls the center, De Goey attacks space, Sidebottom distributes under fire, and Howe intercepts high balls. It's the sum of many answers to trash talk. The opposition may have tried to pick out a weakness, call a player soft, or predict a collapse, but by the end of the match, Collingwood's cohesion becomes the loudest answer of all. Look at the 2020 Finals series. Disrupted by COVID and hub conditions, opponents tried everything. Isolation, crowd-free stadiums, unusual conditions to throw the team off rhythm. But Collingwood adapted. No distractions, no complaining, just clean footy. Every tag, every bump, every planned provocation was met with clinical execution. The Magpies showed that trash talk, whether verbal or tactical, cannot replace preparation, skill, and composure. It's worth noting the psychological side. Collingwood players rarely respond emotionally in public. When the media pushes the narrative of fragility, the team stays tight-lipped. They don't react in press conferences. They don't engage on social media. Their response is entirely on the field. That discipline transforms criticism into a motivational tool. The louder the doubt, the sharper the focus. Collingwood also had history on their side. The club has been around since 1892. Over decades, it's faced expectations, scrutiny, and high-pressure finals. From the 1920s through modern AFL eras, the legacy of persistence and overcoming public doubt feeds current players. The idea is simple. If trash talk is inevitable, use it. Don't complain. Win. Every finals win, every high-pressure victory becomes a reply. Media narratives about fragile teams collapse. Opponents' confidence evaporates, and Collingwood fans, who've been sledged for decades, finally get a satisfying payback. The scoreboard becomes the loudest voice in the stadium, echoing louder than any press conference ever could. So what happens when you trash talk Collingwood? You make them better. You energize their stars. You test their cohesion. You give the fans something to roar about. You make Scott Pendlebury, Jordan DeGoey, Nick Dykos, Steele Sidebottom, Jeremy Howe, and the entire spine of the team rise to the occasion. You plan to challenge, and the Magpies answer it on the scoreboard, in highlights, and in finals history. Across decades, Collingwood has proven time and again that trash talk and doubt are invitations. When others speak, the Magpies execute. When media whispers predictions of collapse, the team produces dominant clearances, unstoppable forward chains, and meticulous defensive structures. And when the siren sounds and the Magpies are victorious, every word of criticism looks foolish, every sledge irrelevant, every question of composure answered with cold, methodical footy. It's why Collingwood remains one of the most feared clubs in finals. It's why fans and players alike understand that September is about more than skill. It's about focus, unity, and using the world's noise as fuel. And it's why any club considering trash talk, sledging, or mocking the Pies quickly learns a lesson. Talk is cheap, execution is permanent, and Collingwood writes its own history, no matter the critics.